think about the person you admire the most. And then I'd like you to think about what it is that they do that tends to be consistent. Now that person could be in the farm, it could be in your network, could be anywhere, it could be an athlete or a bloody good grazier, but just think about that one person and think about what they do consistently. And I won't ask for a show of hands and get you to think and talk to me, but I'll be pretty surprised if that person doesn't consistently make good decisions. In grazing and farming, it is very easy to make a bunch of bad decisions. So this is a very basic model. We get rain, we grow grass, we feed it out to livestock. Typically, a farm, the places that you guys are off or associated with, have a biological pattern. There's a seasonal way that things work here. When it starts to rain, when it starts to warm up, when it starts to cool off, when we grow the haystack, when we feed it down. All right? Now, I don't care where you are in Australia or elsewhere, every farm has this pattern, and it looks very different across a lot of them. But ultimately, that's the pattern that you've inherited mentally, most of the time, in terms of how we do things on this farm, when we buy, when we sell, when we wean, when we join, when we do what we do. And that's how most of the mental models have evolved for how we run the farm. But in fact, it doesn't usually work that way. So here we've just got a bunch of years of the same place, looking at the rainfall over time, but just through consecutive, through the 12-month cycle. And because we're running along and we're pretty busy and we're doing this and we're doing that, we don't really see that. We tend to talk about the weather a lot, but we don't really know where we are in that cycle. So on the top right there, we've got the average. And you'll all know what Dad talks about the average is for June and what the average is for December. And maybe the farmer's got some data like that Picasso there, but it doesn't tell us a story. So data's got to tell us a story. So here's a nice little story that is actually from our Queensland data in MaiaGrazing. And that does tell a bit of a story, because that's telling us the variation from long-term average rainfall on all the properties that's in our database. And all it's really saying is that we had a La Nina, we had an El Nino, and we've been back and forth a few times over that period of time. And I guess the point that jumps out at me with that slide is that you're all a pretty positive bunch, but if at times it feels difficult to know, how we're going in ag in Australia and certainly in Queensland in the last little while, any kind of just-in-time business that relies on its prime ingredient that goes through trends like that is going to find it difficult. Right? I'm not telling you anything because you guys, you're in it, right? But it's an interesting way of stepping back and having a look at the longer-term picture. And basically, there's been 100% variation in the thing that grows your grass over the last little while. And this is why. So, and I'm still getting the hang of what the average age in the room would be, but the average age in the room has probably seen the last 2 or 3 blips up there. So up the top we've got El Nino, dry times, which we're looking down, well, I think we're past looking down the barrel, I think we're looking at it right now. And down the bottom is La Nina, which is simply wet times. And you can see from that we have our week to week, we have our month to month, we have our annual cycle that the younger we are, the longer they feel, the older we are, the shorter they seem to go. But basically, we're part of a much bigger pattern. What's the point? The point is, it isn't just the way it always was for Grandad and the old man. We've either got too much or too little grass at any point in time. Now, if you're a bang Johnny and you're thinking, what's the relevance of this to you? We're all involved, right? We're all affected. So that's actually the same paddock. Too much grass, not enough grass. Too much grass, not enough grass. At the moment, all we can remember is not enough grass, all right? So let's put it into some other context. So this is what I'll call stocking rate to carrying capacity. So stocking rate is what you've actually carried. It's the grass you've actually eaten. Your carrying capacity is what you should have carried based on a few things, but essentially the weather that you had, the season that you had. I've come from a consulting background where we know the numbers. We know the amount of grass we've got. We know how much rain we've had. We know this, we know that, we know this, we know that. But at the end of the day, it's still really bloody hard to match your demand to your supply when you're a grazier, which is really all that's confirming. That second line there is actually the rolling rainfall. Just for fun, I put that in so you can see that actually there's a pretty neat correlation. It's just an inverse relationship. When it's really wet, we tend to be understocked, and when it's dry and drier, we tend to be overstocked. It takes us time to work it out because our mental model takes a while to recalibrate. And generationally, I've watched that change as well in terms of how quick we are to change. So, I've said a bit there. So what is the actual problem? The problem is that we either have too much or too little grass, if our business is all about harvesting grass. And really and truly, if you want to boil it down and be honest, in the cold hard light of day after the wedding, what really matters in ag and where the money is made is in the decision making. That person that I thought about or asked you to think about earlier on. The best people in ag have choices. They have choices now when they're at 50% of long-term average rainfall. And they have choices because they make good decisions. And they didn't always make good decisions, they usually had to learn the hard way too, but the thing is they learned. So that's what I'm trying to impart with you guys, that you've still got time to learn from mistakes. And the problem is that most people actually don't make decisions. They're late to the party. They're destocking when it's too late. They're restocking when it's too late. That's where the margin gets lost. So let's just have a look at the cost of that. And actually the paddock I'm about to show you is not that photo there. I happened to just be fishing at that place last weekend and couldn't help myself taking a photo. So let's just think about the implications of bad decisions. Right? This is a typical farm. Most farms have some better areas. This is actually the yield per paddock over 365 days. The yield being the amount of grass that we put down a cow's throat. Like most farms, some areas are better, they yield more. There's a bit of an average, and then there's the part of the farm that you don't take the visitors when they come for that farm tour. Over here on the right. You don't show anyone that one, right? You take them over here. So, without dilly-dally, what happens when we go into a dry time? Every time that red marker on that El Nino chart came up before, what happens? We start to run out of feed, things start to tighten up. We ultimately end up bashing the Bejesus out of our best paddocks because they're the ones that've got the most to give. How many of you have got data that can tell you that? I'd actually argue with you that you could dig that out if you tried hard enough, but the reason I'm going to put these next few numbers up is just to scare you enough to start thinking about these things, because it typically just rolls on through and we just let the land catch up in the La Nina from the El Nino. So here's just one example out of, I don't know how many I could have chosen, right? I chose this one because I happen to know the paddock. So here we go, we've got a blue line which is rolling rainfall. The green bars are the amount of grass we harvested off this paddock each month. Oh, you know, the mob's in, the cows and calves are in, the weaners come in, the weaners go out, whatever it is, we've just simply tallied up the amount of grass harvested per month, just using a little tool. And you can see the timeline that, you know, things are average, we're actually just bouncing around on average rainfall. And then we hit a dry spell. As we went into the dry spell, you can see that the monthly kind of stocking rate, not kind of, but the monthly stocking rate hasn't really changed. We dropped a bit there, so we made up for it the next month. We took a bit more out, so we left them out for the next month. But if you put a line through that, the stocking rate hasn't changed. We're doing what we're doing. We're stocking that paddock the way we stock that paddock. Don't tell me how to stock paddocks, I know what I'm doing. And all the while it's getting drier. and it did get drier back in 2016. This place actually, by the way, is down in the New England of New South Wales. Anyway, things got drier. And when things get drier, sooner or later, if you don't change the way that you manage your grazing, you're going to run out of grass, right? Because most of the time when you're in this stage here, what are you doing? You're hoping. You're hoping and you're talking about it's going to rain next week, it's going to rain next month. Well, it didn't, and then it did. And when you know, we went back to a wet time. So wetter than average time. But look at the amount of harvest that we could, the amount of forage that was able to be harvested. Now this isn't some, you know, big combine harvester going through. This is a mob of cows. This isn't rocket science. This is just keeping track of a mob of cows. So the yield fell off, even though it got appreciably wetter. So you can see that basically the paddock's saying up yours. I need a spell. It's not rocket science. The paddock is just saying, I can't do it. Come back when you're ready. Or actually come back when I'm ready. And to put that another way, because we know the long-term yield off that particular paddock and the amount of rain that it needed to produce that long-term yield, just like I would in my old days in cropping, we say, righto, the black line there is the amount of grass that we should harvest per 100 mils, which is actually just the carrying capacity. The green line is what the actual harvested grass was, simply because we left the cows in, we took them out, we put them in, we took them out, or we just left them there, just whatever we did, whatever Dad said. And I'm bashing Dad a bit at the moment, aren't I? But you get the idea. Now, if we had have just backed off and done what the numbers said, if we had the numbers, if we'd have backed off a bit back here, then when it got wetter, we wouldn't have given up something like 1.2 tonne of grass. Is that ringing any bells for anyone? You never see that black line. You never see that black line. All you see is that green line and oh dear, dear. It's been a tough run, hasn't it? And that's our best paddock. Right, so the carrying capacity of the whole property is lifted by the average. The average of the whole property's carrying capacity is lifted by our best paddocks. If we bash our best paddocks, boom, you know, not only have we just lost 24 grand on that one paddock for lost dry matter, that we're going to have to go and dip into the barley or the grain or the hay or the whatever, or go to the market because we have to go to the market, but we've actually set that back. And in fact, that paddock's carrying capacity is being set back something like, I actually didn't put it up on this slide because I was tight for time, 33 months later, it's still at 2/3 of its original carrying capacity. So just think about the rest of the property. Righto. Don't look depressed, it's okay. There are people that have confronted this, hopefully even you in your own way, and you're already doing it. Let's find out. The solution, we've talked about the problem. Right, there's got to be a solution, right? It seems logical that knowing your numbers is part of the solution. And having a process for making decisions that actually means that you're selling in a high market and you're buying in a low market, whether that's grain, agistment or cattle, that's how you make money. So what does that mean? Well, knowing your numbers. Right, there's lots and lots of stuff out there. There's lots of things that are going to consume your focus, your attention. All I'd say is it's not as hard as you think. You've got most of the numbers already. Everybody has the rainfall. Everybody carries that around with them. They put it on the fridge, but it tends not to be useful information because it actually doesn't tell you where you are right now relative to where you should be, long-term average or versus trend. How much grass have you grown for that rainfall? And how much grass have you consumed for that rainfall comes into the equation of what your actual carrying capacity is. It's not what the old bloke sitting around the fire or the bar at the pub will say, this country runs a beast to 20 acres or whatever it is. That might be how it used to be, but you saw from those previous graphs, it isn't a steady state thing. Your carrying capacity changes. So hence, your stocking rate matters, right? Per paddock, per land class, per property. It matters. And we can learn that from the past. You'd all have information in your farms that could tell you what the paddock moves were and what the paddock history is and the rainfall, and from that we can actually work out what the carrying capacity is. So in terms of actually doing it, you know, I'd argue there's a role for IT now, because what tends to happen, we've found, is that about 2% you and your peers can carry this around in their heads, or your heads, even on days like today. Carry it around in your head, all of these numbers, the rolling rainfall, how many stock days we've carried, the animal days we've carried, the grass we've consumed, the grass in front of us, how many days since we've been in that paddock, how many days since we've been in that paddock, what's the recovery on the red country versus the black country, whatever it might be. But there's actually a role for IT here is our learning, because most people can't carry it around in their heads. So it's actually as simple as keeping on top of your stock numbers, because that's the demand factory, right? How many mouths are eating how much stuff, and where are they? And you might say, look, I don't know how to estimate an estimate of feed in a paddock, but if you move a few cows around a few times, you'll actually pick it up. It's a feedback loop. It's not that hard. Once we do that, we've got days feed available in front of us, and this is the bit that matters. This is the allocation of supply and demand. It's just a visual representation of it. You're probably carrying this around in your head already, some better than others, but the really top tier graziers have this maths done. And all sorts of different tools available, but that's where our numbers are that tell us how to make better decisions. So those grey colours are mobs in paddocks over time. You might notice also that it's out in the future, where we've decided, where we're forcing ourselves to think about where are the weaners going to go, where are the heifers going to go, where are the cows going to go, and in the process of doing that, we actually realise that we're understocked or overstocked, which in a very broad generalisation is up here as well. Red is bad, blue is good. The reality is, as every El Nino and every La Nina I've been involved with, in my 20 odd years in this stuff, people are off the pace. The people who work this out in the first 6 weeks make the money, on the way in and on the way out. Having the confidence to buy, having the confidence to sell, having the confidence to find adjustment, and so on and so on. So the point is, it isn't actually that hard for you to work out what your actual stocking rate is relative to the rainfall that produced the grass that you just have been eating. Not just today, not just this week, but for the last 12 months. And then working out what it should be, and having a plan to get back. Alrighty, so the actual numbers that you need are not that hard. Rainfall, stock numbers, paddocks, and moving them around. Alright, so if I was I'm just going to give you, that's pretty basic stuff, and that's what we've basically built into this thing called MaiaGrazing. And a lot of people are doing that with grazing charts and other similar sorts of tools. All we've done is digitise it and put it up in the cloud. And I just want to show now a very quick example of the kind of the human and the farm specific side of this, because those other things are hard for you to relate to. So here's just an early pioneer in this stuff. Very different rainfall to you guys. They're down on the New England. Rolling rainfall there. Average is 670 mils for long-term average. In that last, 4 years, there's been 3 dry times where we've gone from 670 to 700 mils of rain back to that 500 mil odd range, which is basically a bit of a drought. And each of those times, the grass consumed per 100 mils has had a spike. So back here, I'll just tell you the human side of it. Back here, people on the farm are working 7 days a week for animals that they ended up putting into the feedlot with a 6-week wait and selling for $400 a head. Pretty painful. And there weren't any numbers to really learn from. So these numbers are retrospectively put together through this period of time here. What is our benchmark? What is our carrying capacity? What is our pain point? What is that stress that we just went through here? It cost us a fortune. It was a bad decision. But let's get a feeling for that and never go back there again. So they implemented some management, which just means keeping track of who's eating what in the paddock, when they get moved, what's the rainfall, pretty basic stuff. And the next dry time, that next drought was mitigated. It was still a bit of a pain, but the heifers got sold early, there was early weaning, and they had a bit of a surge, but they've come back. Then in this last dry time, so on the right side there, that right-hand side there, I was talking to this guy in the last week, he's not stressed. There's more stress in his region at the moment than in that previous couple of droughts. He's not stressed. He's actually bringing cows home next week from agistment that he put them away on 10 weeks ago because he had his markers in place, he made his decisions, he went early, his country's in good shape, he's now got choices. Point is, we need numbers. You've got to know your numbers to be able to link back to where you are and where you should be. We saw that before. So, I didn't come here to give you a yee-haw about you know, how good it all is. I actually just wanted to give you a bit of a shock, a bit of a thought, a bit of a challenge, because if you're in ag and you're making decisions at the paddock level, at the land class level and at the property level, it actually matters. You can actually change the productivity of a farm with your decisions, for better or worse, right? And that's a big asset. It's a big opportunity. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. It's not, what it means is that it's not just luck, right? It actually means that this thing is something that you can manage. So I'll wrap it up there and happily take any questions later on, but I can see from the enthusiasm in your eyes that you're excited. Thank you.